Right, how are we doing, everybody, and welcome to Russell Heritage Golf. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the upper body and maybe more particularly things like feelings around the spine and around the rib cage, you know, going up towards the top of the backswing and then coming in towards the start of the downswing as well. Quite a few questions have come in on this sort of subject, and I think it's an important thing to discuss because I've been talking very much how important the hip movement is in the golf swing, and then if you can get the hip movement, then you can start to respond well with what you're doing in the upper body. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of rib cage feeling first and foremost. Now, obviously the obliques are going to be the things that are going to be triggering most of our motion, but you're going to maybe get more of a feeling in terms of visually as to what the rib cage is doing. Now, when we take our posture, we turn the hips and that starts to kind of introduce the rotation in the backswing position. So as I start to turn the pelvis in towards that leg, it starts to have a knock-on effect in all of my spinal movement. What will then happen is that I need to kind of get the feeling that I'm going to be stretching my left arm away from my body as I go up towards the top. Now, in terms of making sure that you can get this sort of feeling is that, you know, and it's a common one that I've done with other golfers before, is get the feeling that the right rib cage is just rising up as you go in towards the top of the backswing. So as opposed to a golfer who does an incorrect hip rotation, which means that you kind of move more this way, you can see the way the rib cage on this side, it's more like I'm side crunching like I should be in the start of the downswing. So it's a good feeling to kind of get the understanding that your rib cage is rising up as you swing up towards the top. And it normally kind of helps golfers do things like stay much more centered, but it also gives you the sense of putting pressure in towards the ground and creating elevation as you swing up towards the top of the backswing. So not only is it hugely beneficial towards your backswing feeling in terms of to create leverage and this pressure, but also what it's going to do is it's going to help you stay much more centered in the backswing position. So again, like I mentioned earlier, golfers that get the hip rotation incorrect start to move very much in this sort of fashion like this. Again, if you get the feeling of the right rib cage rising up, all of a sudden it starts to get you back into a position where you're much more centered. You're starting to trigger a potential kind of spine extension, so thoracic extension, which means kind of this way, which again helps you do the same sort of things. Helps you keep your head nice and centered, helps you create leverage in the top of the backswing position as well. And by doing these movements and understanding how the hips are moving, means you can put pressure in towards the ground. Now, I've talked about this exercise before, but you know, a lot of people, when I talk on the channel about breaking movements down and trying to understand it, you know, if you can do a drill that makes you feel this, that's what I'm after. So for the people that come for lessons, I don't kind of talk to them about every moving part. I would normally kind of explain what's going on and then try and give them some drills to get the correct sort of feeling. Because if you don't understand it, it's unlikely that it's going to live with you anyway. But even if you did understand it, you need to feel as to what's kind of right and wrong. Good drills is the old windmill drill. So where you place your hands together, you move your right hand behind your head and then you get your left hand to reach up and reach the hand that's behind you. What this does is, as you can see from this sort of position, is that it helps me stay nice and centered and introduces a thoracic extension of the spine. What we can see from the side-on perspective is that if my hand goes directly above my head, not worrying too much about the specifics of the hand position, but again, it's going to help give me this activation down this side. So that's a nice little drill. I've also done a hand separation exercise as well, where you get your hands about shoulder width apart, right hand facing up, left hand facing down. And again, once you're in your posture, just try and lift that left arm as high as you can by using your right arm to help you pull it up. And as long as you're trying to mimic a sort of backswing position, again, you're potentially going to start to get a bit of activation down on this side. Now, to conclude on today's video, we're just going to talk about the transitional area, which is the start of the downswing. Okay, so what would then happen, and I've talked about this a lot on the channel, is that there should be a separation at the start of the golf swing, which basically means that the lower body wants to initiate the rate of rotation first before the upper body closely follows behind. Now, if I was in this sort of position where the rib cage is raised up and I start to independently move my hips around, what you can start to see happens is two things. Right, as my hips start to move in this sort of direction, it kind of has a knock-on effect to my spine. So it introduces what's known as a spine bend. So you can see my spine is now more angulated in this sort of way. Now the benefit of this movement is that it helps me turn, shift pressure, but still stay behind the ball, right? As opposed to moving in front of the ball or potentially getting stuck behind the ball. What happens from a side-on perspective is that if you videoed your golf swing and you drew a line on the top of your right shoulder, as you transition, because of the bending nature in the spine, you'll start to go into a state of what's known, I suppose, as right lateral bend, which basically means it gives you the ability for the right shoulder to drop down closer towards your right hip, which basically helps you get this right elbow driving more in front of the right hip in the transition. So it means that you can start to work much more this way as you initiate the downswing, as potentially opposed to doing anything from over the top or getting a little bit stuck. Through there, then we'll come back to the kind of post-impact position. But yes, I suppose as you swing through, you could get the feeling of the left rib cage mirror imaging the backswing and really rising up as we release the club through. But the priority out of this kind of last couple of weeks is still just understanding the fundamental basics of the backswing. Because if you don't do the backswing correct, then you are going to struggle in the transition and the through swing. And I suppose today's little video just starts to understand that once you can get your head around how the hips are supposed to move, which I've talked a lot about in the channel recently, then all you've got to do is maybe get this sort of feeling of this kind of rib cage rising up, and in transition, getting the feeling of almost like a side crunch as you come down. And if you move this correctly and you have an awareness as to what's supposed to happen, then you'll find that these things will naturally happen, okay? But it's not for everyone, right? It's not for everyone. Not everybody finds these movements naturally easy, which is the reason why first and foremost I try and break them down so you understand what should happen. Then we do little drills like we've done today, going back to the windmill drill and the split handle exercise, because they're really useful exercises so that you can get the right sort of feeling. Get the backswing right as our priority, but what we've also done is just dropped a little bit of a kind of segment into what we'll be talking about very soon, which is very much about the transition and how to separate again and what should happen on the upper body, which we'll come back to in more detail very soon. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Always appreciate a thumbs up and a like. Remember, it's absolutely free to send swings into the channel, right? Loads of golfers are taking the opportunity to do this, which is fantastic, right? I just kind of annotate over the videos that are sent in and republish them back onto my social media pages as soon as I can. And basically it just points golfers in the right sort of direction. It's also absolutely free to press that subscribe button. Press the little bell icon, means that you'll receive notifications every time a new video comes out. I'll catch up with you guys again tomorrow.